I do, like most Belgians, I think. But also, I don't know if this is relevant to you, but it's also something on a more personal level for me. My father worked for the European institutions, therefore I attended the European school in Brussels, where I met the father of my children, who's Italian. So my children are like also the product of Europe, and they also attend the European school. So here in Brussels, we are a little bit part of this Euro bubble, what they sometimes call it. So it's also part of my daily life. But then, as I said at the beginning of my answer, like most Belgians, we do feel we don't have a strong national identity, and therefore we all are moderately positive, or all, most of us are moderately positive about Europe. Yeah. It was meeting Europeans from the European Union was much smaller then, but Europeans from other European member states while growing up. And then I think, looking back at it, but I didn't maybe experience it in a very conscious way, but I suppose the creation of the Schengen zone, where we could travel freely without border checks and everything, that must have been the most, one of the decisive moments. And also, I have to say, the introduction of the euro, that was quite something when you've experienced it in a conscious way. And I don't know, like many people, for how many years I was still counting backwards to Belgian francs as compared to euros. So those are the moments when Europe really comes alive for you.
Of the three, of meeting others, of what I guess is like you spoke of the Schengen area, so the freedom of movement, the experience of freedom of movement, and of the euro, which of the three do you think were the most formative of
the first one, definitely meeting other Europeans, definitely. It gives you a sense of what Europe really is, you know. You play with these mutual prejudices. Portuguese are like this, and the Spanish are more like this. You have friends in all different languages. You speak different languages. So for me personally, it was certainly meeting, growing up with people from different European countries. This is because their parents worked for the European institutions, so they attended a European school here where they could follow classes or take classes in their native tongue, and so this was the result of people from abroad moving to Brussels and staying there often for years and even after the school. Well, if it comes to like the internal European affairs, then I would say the way Europe treated or handled the debt crisis in Greece, the bailout or non-bailout. I mean, I think Europe showed itself from a very bad side in the way it handled this crisis. When it comes to Europe in the world, then I think, well, probably a lot of, the way Europe treats migrants at its borders. I think many people have said it before me, obviously, but I think it's kind of a moral bankruptcy. It's very sad how Europe pushes the problem beyond its own borders and then closes its eyes for what happens in Libya, in the Mediterranean. The Turkey deal is also a little bit doubtful from a moral point of view. So I think this, and obviously I also understand that it's not only a European responsibility. This is also the member states are to blame. They've blocked a lot of European solutions, but still, I think for the image and the values Europe wants to uphold, this is pretty disastrous. Yeah, so I do think it would be the fall of the Berlin Wall, because I remember it very vividly when I was a student, and I remember visiting Berlin for the first time with a friend just before that. And so, yeah, I think the whole sense of new opportunities, of a new world, of being on the verge of a new era, and everything that followed from it, and this. Yeah, it really felt historical. So I think in recent history, that would be my very best moment. I went, as many people, I studied 1 year in France, thanks to the European Union, which was very nice. My children grow up to be free lingual European citizens, thanks to Europe. So Europe is pretty present in my personal life. It's my also, when you think of culture and literature, if I have to identify with a space, it would be more the European space. And well, Belgium is of course a country which is not really a country. So yeah,
How do you mean?
I mean that we have we have a very a Belgian nation is not really something that exists in the mind of people. Of course, I am Belgian, but I don't feel like I have a Flemish nationality either. But because we have such a complicated country, we do not identify a lot with it, and I think Europe is stronger in my present in my personal identity than Belgium would be.
Is that do you think most Belgians feel that way? So they sort
no, maybe not. There's a difference also between the Flemish people, who identify less with Belgium in general than the French-speaking part. There is more, how to say it in English? They are more attached to the Belgian construction, but I'm sure in yes, on the Flemish side, but I think it's a layered identity, and Europe is part of it. We are not like the French or countries with a strong patriotism and strong national identity. So therefore, and also Brussels, of course, is the home of the European institutions. So maybe the distance is a little bit shorter between us and Europe, even though there's Euro criticism also in Belgium, of course, but less. Even the extreme parties are not so Euro-skeptical as they would be in other countries, I think. For example, what Europe has done for me is that here in Brussels, I have quite a large circle of friends from all over Europe. Because Europe brought all these people to Brussels has changed a lot over the last 20, 30 years. Thanks to immigration and thanks to the European institutions, or maybe 40, 50 years. I mean, Brussels has become one of the most international cities in the world. So when you live here, Europe is not something abstract.
What is it? Why is that important? Do you think? To
well,
live in
for
an
me, it's
international
something
place?
I like. It's something personally that I enjoy very much, because it opens your horizons. You get to speak other languages. People bring along. You can find great. People bring along their culture, their shops, their everything. So you can find. Yeah, it just broadens your daily world.
Okay, maybe this would be a good point to ask you about what it's like to be Belgian in the EU specifically. So this is a question that Professor Gartnash wanted us to cover. He mentioned that you mentioned these staggering figures about child poverty in Brussels. So what are your thoughts on being a Belgian?
That is something pretty, yes. So in Brussels, there is quite a stark contrast between, let's say, the richer communes where the expats, the well-off expats live, and on the other hand, the more central communes of the Brussels area, where people with a migration, but usually Belgians, but with a migration background live, and where the poverty is in fact is extremely high. And as I told Professor Ash, in Brussels, statistics say that 1 out of 3 children who are born in Brussels grow up in a household without live underneath the poverty, how do you call it, the poverty level, and grow up in a household without income from labor, work, or whatever. So this contrast is very is yeah, it's very difficult to accept, obviously.
Is there any tentative explanation for that stark contrast? Because I think it's very surprising. I mean, the idea that there is a Belgium is a country where that would not happen. I don't know, for me at least.
Yeah, well, it's a very complex problem, obviously. The unemployment rates are very, very high in these areas. Schools or school dropout is a huge problem. Brussels is a complicated city where, as to work, you would need to, even for low qualified jobs, often you need to speak at least the 2 national languages, which is already a problem. So a lot of factors intervene. Yeah, some people say it is partly the fault also of incapable politicians that have disregarded the problem, and because of our institutional complexity, which is pretty dazzling, I have to say. So for every problem you want to tackle, you need 3 governments around the table and 20 people, and so decision-making processes are extremely slow and inefficient, but there's not one explanation why this is so, obviously, but it is a real problem. And I have also noticed during this pandemic, not only me, but more and more visible poverty on the streets of Brussels, more and more people living on the streets, in parks, queuing up for the food banks. Yeah. So the Brussels is a very contrasted city.
So does the decision complex, the administration complexity, does it have anything to do with the European Union's headquarters, I guess, being...
No, it does not. Those are actually, well, it's a pity because these are 2 separate worlds. Already, I think a lot of, and that's one of my regrets, a lot of European experts, they do not mingle with, let's say, with the local people. They live in their own, they have their own churches, cultural associations, their own restaurants. So it is sometimes a bubble, and they don't go to the neighborhoods, the poorer neighborhoods in this, not all of them, but I mean, generally speaking, I've often noticed that yeah, it's an expat life, not So these are two distinct realities, but we cannot blame Europe for Brussels poverty. On the other hand, obviously, this is a problem of our own making.
And again, how would you describe the experience of being Belgian in the EU? Because there's this apparent association because of the location of European buildings and for our institutions. So
I feel, but obviously, I think I'm a bit biased positively towards the European Union throughout my experiences, and so I often find myself also in the position as a Belgian towards other Belgian of having to defend the European Union, because we also have this idea that it's a big, expensive bureaucratic machine. But as I said, Belgians are, me as well, are relatively positive about the European Union, also because we have the feeling that our country, the Belgian level, is kind of is evaporating. So our ideas, some competences should go to Europe on a higher level, and other competences we will do it on the regional level, Flanders, Brussels, the Walloon region, and many people in Flanders anyway are in favor of a small Belgian state. So that is one of the reasons why Europe is seen as a good alternative in the eyes of a lot of people for a dysfunctional Belgian state. Well, it's green agenda, it's climate goals. No, I think that would be great. I'm just a little bit skeptical, but if Europe would be able to achieve that, I think Europe will have proven its worth. Yeah. Oh, I think it will have to be a mixture of so many things, and also over time still keeping in mind the social dimension of green measures, because it's easier said than done. Some people ban short flights or make them much more expensive. We should not forget that, that there's also every time a social dimension to these measures. I think Europe should be, behind should enforce member states to do what needs to be done. I think that is the role of Europe, to make sure that the member states meet the targets that were set. In what way they do it, I think that is maybe less important. But here in Belgium, we are already discussing that we will probably not meet the target. So I think Europe should maybe, yes, financially sanction, or really be a tough policeman in this area.